recording. So my name is Demetrius with Career Clarity, and this is Mastering the Job Hunt. It is just going to be a pretty concise and as practical as possible guide to creating a effective job search strategy. Especially in this new year, we're going to see a lot of companies begin to open up their hiring again, especially after holidays. And it's a great time to effectively incorporate a job search strategy or methodology to effectively um, go about, targeting companies and going through a consistent practice or process. So some of the things I want to address here in this webinar really is some of the common issues that I find with some of the job seekers I have the opportunity to work with. One of the things that we learn is, you know, a lot of people do what we call is the spray and pray method, right? Which is the idea of like I'm mass applying to places, right? I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the like the LinkedIn Easy Apply, and Indeed has a very similar feature for those who are in the US doing job searches, right? Those are some of the common sites there. And what I see, especially when I was in recruitment, is that I receive hundreds of applications, right? And realistically, a hiring manager, recruiter, or HR person is not going to look at all of these resumes because they don't have the time to do that, right? So I see effectively that people are just kind of like spraying and praying, or they're wishing that something will happen from just the quantity of output that they're doing, right? Another common thing is people either get almost zero interviews, right? I've seen someone who had applied to 1,000 positions over the last year and a half and had zero interviews, right? Which can be very demoralizing. So those are some of the common things we see. And other things like not networking effectively or not getting any responses on LinkedIn or other networking platforms. And one of the big things that I see as well is people just don't keep track of their job search, right? That they have some jobs in their email where they get responses from LinkedIn and other sites. Some have them just directly on LinkedIn, some have them on Indeed. But really, it makes it so that their job search is scattered and unorganized, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about the benefits of having a concise and effective kind of place to job search from. So today we're really just going to cover these topics here, which is just going over what market research is and by definition what that looks like, creating a job search strategy. So a really basic methodology that I like to use and give to people, which is called the LAMP method. And then a couple of things about effective networking, right? Which we're not going to dive into too deep today. We'll have some other sessions in the future about how to effectively network for your job search. But we'll cover some of the basics of utilizing LinkedIn and some other tools like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my personal background before I dive into some of the material. Oftentimes, at least myself, I always ask, why does anyone have the authority or why do they want to talk about a subject, right? And so my background really comes from a number of years that I spent in recruitment working with Randstad, S3, and Oscar, which are some fairly large recruitment firms. I did biotech and um, roles similar to that, right? So like scientists and researchers and some lab individuals. And then I also did some manufacturing and logistics positions, which are going to be more factory type jobs there. And so in those positions, I learned a lot about reviewing resumes, the hiring process, the interview process, what hiring managers and HR people were looking for, what were their red flags, right? And what were their green flags? Some of the common things that you see in that kind of industry there. And in my spare time, I do something called authentic relating. So I've hosted hundreds of circles of their interpersonal workshops, right? And for some people, you wouldn't, you're like, why are you mentioning these interpersonal workshops? And that kind of goes back to the foundation that the job process is a human-led process, right? With increasing amounts of technology, applicant tracking systems, we have artificial intelligence, interview technology, and we're having more and more advanced personality tests, right, that are coming out. But at the end of the day, for the foreseeable future, you are going to be hired by an individual. You're going to be interviewed mostly by interviewed individuals or your peers. And so there is a strong human element that we have to understand and use to our advantage to get into positions that we are looking to get into. And lastly, I spent some time as an HR generalist, managing some employee relations, onboarding, and got to hire a number of individuals. So I got to sit in that role. So this is a little bit about my personal experience. And another thing, I just enjoy job searching, which something people say is a bit crazy, but I enjoy the process of finding opportunities, of interviewing and showcasing my skill set, which has kind of led me to where I am in this process here. So enough about me. I want to go into some just quick tips, right? And some basic things to think about that can be helpful to reflect on, right? So for a lot of individuals, especially professionals that are going to be, online sales, digital marketing, graphic design, LinkedIn is going to be one of our major tools for job searching and networking, right? LinkedIn has billions of users, and pretty much gives us the opportunity to understand their work, their projects, understand whole companies, structure, ideology, and their hiring trends, right? So LinkedIn is a great tool, and one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that you can have up to 30,000 connections on LinkedIn, right? And for the average person in any field, 30,000 people should cover most of the key players in your industry, right? And I don't expect you tomorrow to have a list of 30,000 people, right? But really, I say that because we want to consistently invest in our network, right? You probably hear this phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And truthfully, I think it's both, right? I think you should be very skilled at what you do and investing in your craft, but at the same time, you should be equally investing in your network and individuals that share your craft, they share your values, they share your goals, career goals, and other large goals as well, right? So I would consistently start to add even a few people a week, 10 people a week shouldn't take you that long, that are second connections or third connections to you, right? Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about creating a modern job search. And what we say, what is a modern job search, is really utilizing what tools we have at our fingertips to support us, right? In the past, we had to take on so much more writing, finding out information, and doing all these things that now we have Google and we have Grammarly or ChatGPT, and we have all these tools that actually can save us time and energy, and we can effectively shorten our job search and conserve our energy for more important tasks, right? So we'll talk about some tools later on that you can utilize to uh, kind of modernize your job search, but we want to make sure that most things that can be automated can be automated. Things that we typically would have done, like writing cover letters, we can use other technology to assist with that, right? And thirdly, one of the things that I find that people run into a lot is that they get zero responses on LinkedIn. And one of the things that's common for me in the past was that I just didn't use LinkedIn when I wasn't job searching, right? So you'll find that 48% of users are active monthly in the United States, and I think it's less in other countries. So that means 52% of people just aren't using LinkedIn on a monthly basis, right? So when we talk about networking, we want to understand that maybe LinkedIn is not the most effective or most efficient way to get in contact with different individuals. So you want to find out other ways of contacting people, whether that be email or events or what have you, right? So that you can effectively get that kind of networking off the ground. So I want to talk about some short success stories because I've it's been a challenging year for some people. But I had the opportunity to work with a senior manager who had left his company after 10 years, was searching for about 6 to 8 months and was rejected the whole time. We were able to revamp his resume and reapplied using a tailored kind of strategy to target certain companies. And this individual was able to get a 100K increase over his last position, mainly because he hadn't moved in so long that his value is higher than if he just stayed in the same place. And then we also had Reese and Melissa, which we were able to do salary negotiations for 17 and 30% increase, right? By really just talking about not only cost of living, but framing their skill sets and comparing them against the market and other people in those organizations, right? So I always tell people don't leave money on the table, and that could be with money or benefits, right? But there are so many wins that are happening in the job market. So I know a lot of people I talk to feel demoralized or discouraged, but there are so many beautiful opportunities out there still. It's just really finding them and talking to the right people. So as we talk about kind of refining our job search or getting into our job search, I want to break down how I look at a job search and some of the key elements that I find that are important for us to have the confidence to have the system in place to move forward, right? So one of the stages we talk about is career clarity. We talk about preparation, research, outreach, and then we have feedback, right? So when we talk about career clarity, one of the things that we really ask in this specific stage is, well, what do I want to do, right? So I've worked with several people that they've been in their company for, 5 to 7 years. I was working with a lady who was in for 20+ years, and they downsized, and she was now like, okay, well, I've been doing the same thing for so long. What do I do now, right? So those are the questions we talk about in career clarity. So it's like, okay, what are my strengths, weaknesses? What kind of teams do I work better in, or environments I work better in? What kind of leadership do I work the best under, right? Am I motivated by someone who's high pressure or like likes to yell or is like really on top of us? Do I like a more gentle, compassionate person? Where do I see myself navigating inside of these roles? Do I want to be a leader in the future? Do I want to be an individual contributor? So these are questions that we ask ourselves to get some clarity, right? And you're not always going to know 100% what you want to do in the future, right? But it's good to set a framework down and start to move towards something. And your next steps will be illuminated as you kind of get more clarity there, right? So in this stage, we'll do a lot of self-assessments. There's a lot of really cool tools. I like Tom Rath's Strength Finders, which I can never get this thing to unblur at the right time. I just take my word for it. It's called Strength Finders, which is a really cool kind of personality test. There are going to be a lot of career-oriented ones at varying costs. Some are going to be free. Obviously, you may find that there's a discrepancy in their ability. Yeah. Yeah. So can I put that in the chat? So I have Strength Finders here. I'll put it in the chat for you all who can see Strength Finders 2.0. Oh, that's supposed to be an O, not a P, but you'll get it. So we'll talk about self-assessments and then defining our career goals, right? Long term, we're talking about, do I want to live on the beach or do I want to be a CEO, right? Those are completely different trajectories that you should at least start to think about or define, Um, and then we want to talk about research. We want to research careers, right? This is a really solid place that we want to go window shopping. We want to start to see what it's like to be in these different types of roles uh, before we invest all of our time, energy, and even our education into these kind of things, right? Sorry, I see someone said that it did not show up in the chat. Oh, I think it went to one individual person. Thank you for letting me know. Finders 2.0. Here, thank you. So this is a great place for us to start to window shop, right? So we want to start to have informational interviews, talk to people in these different positions so that we don't waste our time going deeper in the role, right? I think Abraham Lincoln, who was a U.S. president, had a famous quote. He said, "If I had 4 hours to cut a tree down, or something like that," he said, "I spend 3 hours sharpening my axe." Right. So in the job search is similar. We want to spend more time researching, understanding what things look like before we jump in and try to take action, so that we can save our time and energy. Right. So with that being said, we move on to this phase that we call preparation, right? So we have some clarity. Okay, I want to be, a mechanical engineer in this region. I have a general idea what I'm going for. So how do I prepare for my job search, right? So these are some of the basic items that I need to effectively prepare for my job search. One is going to be an updated resume, right? And updated, I just means it has your most recent experience on there, has the right logistical information on there as well, right? And it's going to really be able to say what I've done, how long I've done it, and how effective I was at doing this specific task, right? It's going to be a lot of what our resume covers. You go into our LinkedIn profile. Now, everyone will not have a LinkedIn profile, right? Like I said earlier, there are going to be some like blue collar workers, like who I worked with in the past, they didn't have a LinkedIn because they didn't job search that way, right? So a lot of the people that they met, they were in unions, they were in kind of like smaller circles, right? But if you're a professional that uses LinkedIn and knows that there are a lot of other people that are in your industry, you want to effectively make sure that you also showcase what you've done, update your education and skills section, and just have a decent picture, right? You don't have to have like a professional photographer, but just showcasing yourself and looking good, right? Because you want to make a good impression. Another thing we want to talk about is references. So for those that are applying for jobs, you're going to see that they often request 3 to 5 references, especially here in the U.S. market. That's going to be someone that's a supervisor, manager, or who's a higher title than you, right? That can speak to your skill set. And the reason why I add that on in your preparation is that I've seen so many candidates go into the process and then not have that ready, and it's slowed the process down, or it's caused them a lot of internal stress to try to figure that out or scramble last minute, right? So preparing that beforehand, just reaching out to those individuals and letting them know that you're going to be a part of a job search, that they may be contacted and that they're okay with those things. And sometimes even talking about what you want them to highlight could be helpful, right? Uh, to make things look good. And then our next step we're really going to talk about is calculating runway, right? So one of the things that a lot of job seekers run into is that they start their job search, a month, their first month, they may have 2 interviews, maybe 3, right? Um, and maybe things don't pan out and then they continue their job search, right? But their job search goes on for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, maybe 6 to 8 months, right? And so when we originally think that we're only job searching for like 4 to 8 weeks and then we're in the market for 8 months, right? We have to take into consideration how much runway do I have, right? How long can I effectively do a job search with the amount of resources that I have currently, right? And the reason why we want to address this early on is because that we don't want to get pigeonholed or forced into a position where we take a role that we're not comfortable with, happy with, or isn't lucrative for us because we just ran out of time, right? So there are several things you want to take into consideration. Do you want a part-time job? Can you do contract work? Or whatever you can do to elongate your runway so that you can effectively have time to choose the right role for you, right? And occasionally you may even take a transitional role, right? Which is one that is not a role that you want, but one that gives you enough financial stability to have a easier search, right? Which some people do. And then lastly, we talk about our cover letter, which are really just personalized stories to different companies, letting them know what you've done and why that effectively is good for their organization, right? So these are really specific and really helpful later on in the process. They're not going to be a lot of individuals that don't, you know, there's going to be a lot of individuals that don't read your cover letter till later on in the process. And Jenna, I will answer your question later on as we get to our Q&A phase. So please hang on tight. So cover letters are going to be effective, usually not at the beginning of your application process, but you absolutely should write them effectively, which we'll talk about some tools to do that briefly. So market research, right? So some of the questions that we'll ask in this phase, right, when we talk about understanding your job, your industry, we want to see, okay, what companies are hiring, right? What companies are downsizing or maybe have run out of money, right? We want to know what laws or what external factors could be affecting our industry, right? And that could be technology, that can be governmental things, right? And then we want to know, okay, what skills are developing in my industry, right? And what technology is prominent, right? So there are a lot of questions you can ask that can be answered by research or what we call market research. And really, we're just trying to understand the industry trends, growth potential, and some of the major players in your specific industry, right? So some of the tools that we'll use to kind of go into this is going to be like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn has several tools. Actually, they have a wide range of tools. In my recruitment time period, we utilize a lot of LinkedIn tools to find candidates to understand more about companies and their structure, right? So with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you can see talent trends. So they'll say things like how long people have stayed at a company. We'll talk a little bit more about employee retention, hiring patterns, like they hire at this time frame or this, uh, in this phase of the year. So these are really great tools for you to know, right? So when you're approaching your job search, you can say like, oh, a lot of people leave company A to go to this specific company B, and they hire people from that company, right? And so there are a lot of different ways that you can utilize that information and refine your search so that's easier for you, right? PayScale is really cool because it oftentimes will give you some idea of how much companies are paying for certain positions. A lot of the candidates that I've worked with, especially during salary negotiation, they are guessing how much they should ask for. Like they just don't know, right? So oftentimes they're like, "Oh, well, I want whatever you're offering," right? So they leave a lot of money on the table, or they may ask for a large amount but have no reason to back that up, right? So things like PayScale can be really insightful to give you an idea of how to enter those conversations effectively with confidence. And then Glassdoor is a really cool website here where we kind of use it to review the how good a company is, right? On a scale to 1 to 5, right? One being terrible and 5 being an amazing opportunity. We can go and review companies and see what people say about them as far as their culture, their leadership, their benefits, and their pay, right? So for those in the US and some of the nearby countries that utilize Glassdoor, it's a great tool for you to understand a little bit about the reputation of your company. I would not specifically like use Glassdoor as your main source, right? You always want to use multiple indicators to understand a holistic picture of your company, right? Because a lot of the times people will say more negative things than positive about companies, especially if they were let go or if they leave under certain circumstances. So you want to be mindful of that. And I see a number of questions popping up, which I'll be more than happy to address a little later on. So we want to also take into consideration the size of companies and the effect that has on our job search. It's a very simple idea, but it's something that a lot of people just kind of skip over, right? So when we talk about a micro enterprise, right, or a company that's between 1 and 10 people, and then a company that has 10,000 people, right? You think of companies like Tesla, Amazon, um, Microsoft, and all Alibaba, and all these other very large companies. They have a completely different hiring process compared to a startup company, right? And why that's important is the time frame that our interview process will take will be much longer, shorter, depending on what kind of company it is. So oftentimes when I was working for startups, we could get someone hired within 3 to 4 weeks because in the first week of interviews, they talk to like their like hiring manager and sometimes the CEO of the actual company, right? And then the second interview might be some team members, and then third interview they have you walk around the property and kind of meet see the location, then they'd hire you, right? Whereas when I had people being hired by Tesla, for example, their process took 3 months, right? And they were beginning to affect their runway because they didn't plan on the process to be that long, right? So they had their recruiter interview, their hiring manager interview, a panel interview. They flew them on site to see the place, and that happened over a long course of time, right? So we want to be mindful of the size of organizations because that will definitely affect our timeline, and it'll help you plan and understand how long it'll take you to negotiate and what choices to make, right, around your timing. So I did want to offer for those who are on the chat and also those who signed up for my newsletter, I give the opportunity to do a resume slash LinkedIn bundle, which is a personalized video, a copy of a lamp list that's kind of created, and then a resume building prompts to use artificial intelligent tools effectively to uh, develop your resume cover letter with ease. And then again, we have a optional 30-minute one-on-one call, which is the add-on for those who want a personalized description of how to effectively use your resume in LinkedIn, right? So That's one of the offers we have there as we move into our LAMP list. So as I mentioned before, our LAMP list is a very simplistic methodology for job searching. It comes out of the book, The 2 Hour Job Search, right? There are many ways to go about your job search, right? And I will say most methods are better than no method at all, right? I enjoy utilizing the lamp list and walking people through this because it's just easy to create. It's easy to adapt and it's fairly customizable, right? So our lamp list really is, it stands for list, advocacy, motivation, and posting. So first, we want to see that our list is pretty much a list of targeted companies that effectively like match our goals. They match our salary kind of desires and things like that and our basic logistics. Advocacy is going to be looking at individuals who can effectively help us in our job search, right? So advocates can be people that you know from college and people that you know from the community and things like that. Motivation is really going to see as you go through your job process, how motivated are you to work at this place, right? If it's a 1 out of 5, maybe you don't want to focus a lot of your energy working for that specific organization, right? If it's 5 out of 5, maybe you'll prioritize and wait for that opportunity versus moving on with other organizations, right? And then posting is really just kind of be talking about what opportunity exists, right? And just kind of posting that in your Excel or Google sheet to keep track of that. So our employer list, like I mentioned, we're going to really look at about 30 to 40 companies. You can get up to 50, right? The reason why we have a cap on these companies is because we effectively want to create a list that's manageable enough for us to research and network within, right? So if you aren't able to keep track of your companies, then you don't really know what's happening. So when I talk to people and I ask them, how many companies have you applied to? And they'll say, oh, I've applied to 160 companies over the last 4 months or 2 or 3 months. And they'll say, how many companies are live right now? Like, how many are you currently in the running for that are still open? And usually they'll be like, I don't know, right? I don't know how many of them are actually still available, even, right? And that really just shows me that they aren't able to have their job search organized or are in place, right? So those are one of the things that we want to be aware of is that 30 to 50 companies is manageable enough to do effective networking and continuously to follow up with over a course of a number of weeks. So advocacy is a really big part of the lamp list and job searching in general, right? I'm sure most of you all here on the call have met someone who got a job through someone else, right? I've had a number of jobs and I've gotten probably 25% of them because I was referred by someone else that worked there, right? Who was a friend of mine from school or just the community, right? So advocates can be friends, they can be previous colleagues, they can be someone that you have a loose connection with, someone that's shares a hobby to you that you're an acquaintance with, but they're really people that are supportive of you in your job search or supportive with a specific job process, right, or a specific company. And you can find these advocates on your social media, Instagram, Facebook, not TikTok anymore, but other things that you connect and socialize with people, right? LinkedIn's great when we talk about our first and second degree connections, which are friends and friends of friends, right? And as you get further and further, you can start to reach out to people you don't know well, but maybe share similar interests or similar values or what have you, right? So these are our advocates. So when we talk about advocacy, we want to approach reaching out to individuals on email, on LinkedIn, and other places as well, and really reaching out to say, hello, like, you know, I may, you can mention a connection you have. So you say, oh, we both know Joe or Johnny or what have you from this company or this organization. I saw that you worked at this place. I see that you do this specific kind of work. I would love to get some more insight, right? To learn a little bit more about what you do, right? And would you be open to chatting a little bit more in depthly, right? So some of the things that we want to avoid is being too generic, right? So if you could take the time to look over someone's page to understand what they do, the more, so when people reach out to me, the more clear they are about how much they know about me, why they're reaching out to me is actually really it piques my interest. I'm more inclined to talk to someone that I know has invested a little bit amount of time to understand me a little bit more, right? So we want to keep these messages very short. No one wants to sit there and read paragraphs from someone they don't know, right? We want to make sure that there's no grammatical error, that you take the time. There's a lot of tools to make sure you don't affect that. We want to also not mention any specific job, right? Because that can often cause pressure and seem very transactional when you're reaching out to people initially, right? You want to keep your interests general, especially about that person, and be connection focused. So really being like, oh, let me get to know this person, get to know their industry, get to know their work, right? So those are the ways we want to approach advocates, and also understanding that right now you are looking for a job, you will have a job eventually. And those other individuals that are in your network and people that you work with can utilize you as a resource in the future, right? So never think that you are like mooching off people. You're really building relationships of reciprocity, right? Where you can give and take, right? Are healthy connections and healthy networks. So that leads us into a core practice, which we call informational interviewing, right? So when I mentioned career clarity or wanting to get clarity on a specific industry or role, I recommend doing informational interviews, right? Which is really just taking the time to connect with an individual in that industry, in that position, or in a specific company with the goal of several things, right? Understanding what their work looks like. What are some of the challenges and rewards of being in this industry? What is the advice of entry, right? So what advice would you give someone to enter this specific company, right? We want to talk about, you know, what networking tips, where do you meet people? Where does everyone congregate? Are there certain conferences I should go to? Are there certain other places I should check out to meet other individuals, right? And then also, what education may I need, right? Are there certain tools I should focus on, methodologies, or certifications that would make me look better in this field or in this pursuit, right? So that's kind of the goal of our informational interviews. They can be somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes to an hour. You want to be respectful of people's time, and offer, a short amount of time. And if they're open to more, be willing to do that. But come prepared and understanding that person, the company to the best of your knowledge, so that people know that you're invested and that you're generally interested in the work that they do, right? So the last two letters of our lamp list really goes back to motivation. Like I said, once we learn more about companies from market research, informational interviews, or actual interviews with the company, you may find you just don't like the company as much as you thought, and it'll go from 4 stars to maybe 2 stars, right? Or vice versa. You may have been very hesitant about an opportunity, and then you went to the location and you're like, oh, the people that work here are amazing. The work-life balance is great, and this is a great place for me to learn and develop new skills, right? So you want to make sure that you update your motivation for you so you can keep an eye out on opportunities that look good for you, right? And that are aligned with you. And that also just makes your job search easier in the future because you can start to look for companies that look like the ones you already like a lot, right? Posting is really just finding active job postings and then putting them in your lists like hyperlinks just so that you can check on them, see if the jobs are still live. Sometimes on LinkedIn, you'll see it specifically who the hiring manager is for that role, right? So that can be an effective way to just kind of keep tabs on those roles. One of the things that I often tell people as well is sometimes you want to still reach out to a company even if they don't have an active role, right? So a really quick story, a number of years ago, because I lead these interpersonal workshops, I wanted to do them for children. So I was looking at organizations that hosted these kind of workshops or emotional intelligence workshops for youth. I found a company, they're a really popular nonprofit organization. I reached out to one of the CEO. I reached out directly to the CEO, who told me that they were not hiring, but would be hiring in the future. Long story short, I ended up getting into the third round of interviewing. They didn't choose me for that specific role, but what she told me was I was the only person that was referred, that wasn't referred to the position that applied, and they didn't even have an active posting for the role. But I just seemed so passionate and had some relevant experience, and that she wanted me to go through the process. So one of the things that you find is that sometimes opportunities are not yet presented. Sometimes positions are being created, problems exist, but the solution hasn't been addressed, right? Which the solution could be you if you have the right skills to address a company's problem. So I would still reach out to organizations because most other people are deterred from doing that, right? So if you're reaching out to organizations that match your skill set, your values, and they have hired for your role in the past, I would definitely just send out a message, understand their timeline, and things like that, right? To see if they have opportunities arising in the future. So one of the things that I find as well is that when I ask people how often they follow up on jobs or how often they follow up with their advocates, I hear zero times, right? Sheepishly, people are like, "Oh, I don't actually follow up with any companies," which is okay, which is okay, right? I don't recommend, but I understand why someone, especially if you're applying to 100 places, wouldn't follow up with each place. I will tell you the benefits of following up to places. One, demonstrates persistence and dedication. Two, allows you to kind of people to be aware of your presence more than other job seekers, right? And I've definitely gotten into several roles just by being more persistent than other people, right? Which was following up, learning more, asking questions. And so I recommend often when you're reaching out to advocates and the applications that you've done in the past, just to reach out two or three times to see, where they are in the process, if they were able to review your information, if they had any additional questions, right? And that really allows you to be proactive in your job search. So a lot of people that work with me, they understand that my philosophy is always proactivity, like to be proactive, right? I don't believe in applying to 10 places and then sitting down waiting for someone to get back to you. I want you to take as much control over this process as possible. And following up and just outreach in general allows you to have more effect on your job search than not, right? You can use tools like ChatGPT or Cloud AI or Gemini AI to draft general messages, right? You don't always want to copy and paste ChatGPT or any of these AI tools, but you want to effectively save yourself time. If you know that you're not the best writer, if you don't have a lot of time, you don't want to spend 3 hours writing a cover letter. If a technology can do it better and can and help you create a framework and outline to fill in yourself, right? But at the same time, you also don't want to sound like a robot or too gimmicky, which ChatGPT and some other software is pretty infamous for sounding too professional or too like too perfect sounding in some ways. So that's what I say about following up. It's very crucial. With a lamp list, you can effectively keep yourself up to date and on track with those things. So some of the general things we'll look at, right? So you want to update your list consistently, right? And that includes environment, pay, logistics, and lifestyle. Um, we have allocate 10 to 25 hours on your job search a week, right? A lot of the times I see people are as they are demoralized, right? They lack consistency in their job search because they've received 20 messages that are like, unfortunately, we're going along with someone else in the process. So their job search is stop and start, and there's not a lot of momentum in that process, right? So what we want to spend our 10 to 25 hours doing is conducting market research, understanding how great, like how good is our resume and how good is our value proposition, right? How valuable are we to organizations on the market? And if we don't appear that valuable, how do we make ourselves look better, right? Do we need to gain more education? Do we need to rewrite our resume or cover letter or LinkedIn, right? So, and the rest of the time we'll be doing following up applications and informational interviews, right? So there's a infinite amount of things you can do, excuse me, but I'd focus on consistency than I would on just doing a large amount of activities, right? Consistency is always going to trump, you know, staying up 24 hours, applying to places on LinkedIn, right? And lastly, just a general thing, especially about resumes, is just making sure that you tailor your resume as best as you can to different opportunities. Some of you with your cover letter, you want people to think that you are made for this position. This is what you're going after, and this is what you're dedicated to. Can ease doubts and make your interview process easier if you customize these points, right? So, with the remaining time, I just wanted to kind of go over some of the questions here. Um, I have a few questions. At Ethan earlier on, can our talk be played back? So yeah, this will be up. The recording will be available by request. And so we had a question. Do you know any employers that don't go through the interview process? I mean, not really. I mean, there are smaller companies that are going to be that are going to have a more of a handshake process. Like I've had people who I walked in and they're like, "Yeah, you should start with us," right? But you want to be weary of companies that don't have an interview process. That's kind of like letting just anyone walk into my house, right? That means that there also isn't a who you hire really affects the culture of a company. So if I don't have a strong interview process or a qualifying process, it may mean that I may not have the best culture either, right? So I don't know if I want to personally work for a place that doesn't interview or have a good interview process. Muthu Kumar. I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. I will try to work on that. Do I have a list of questions about the market research? I don't have them written. I can write some for those who are interested. And for a given role and number of experience in specific city, at average salary estimating, can you suggest some better websites. So LinkedIn's good for general information. Like I said, Glassdoor is going to be great. You have some public information. So like the US has some government websites that talk about trends of industries that you can kind of look at as well. They're going to be good. Indeed also has some tips on there that are going to be pay some brief things about the company as well, which are going to be helpful. So there are a number of tools, right? The ones that I offered are not the only ones, but they're going to be really helpful there. So I had a question about the hidden jobs network, right? So when we talk about hidden jobs, you said that they don't have an active role. Roles is there are usually happen that or there's no job. So pretty much asking how common is like our quote unquote hidden jobs, right? And they're not technically hidden, they're just not publicly advertised, right? So how often is that really it's contingent on several things, right? The specific role, some roles are meant to not be publicly posted because maybe that role is crucial to the company and they don't want their competitors to know that they're hiring or building out certain departments. Sometimes someone just left the company, right? And they need to fill or backfill a role. Sometimes, they are looking to create or solve a problem that a position hasn't been created for. So there are a number of companies that don't always publicly advertise their roles. It's not going to be every company. Obviously, you're going to find a lot of companies on LinkedIn. But even in my company, I've had people, they're like, oh, we need to hire someone, but they just haven't gone through the process of doing that. So you can find that there are going to be a number of opportunities where that can happen, right? I don't know the specific number, but I definitely know it does happen a bit. So another question is, what do you do with an employer who doesn't give you detailed feedback after you don't get selected from an interview? So very common. It's very rare that anyone really wants to give you feedback after an interview, right? Especially if they didn't hire you. It can put a company in a hot seat if they're like, "Oh, the reason we didn't hire you was because of whatever, like your experience doing this or that," right? We don't want they don't want to put themselves at legal risk by telling you why they didn't interview you, right? The best time to get feedback in an interview well, is during the interview, right? You want to take the time in the interview and you can frame it in several ways. But I'm like, hey, I really enjoyed my time. Like, how did you think about this interview process? Or how do you feel about where I am in this process, right? So there are several ways to frame that question, but really what you're asking is getting an idea of how they feel about where you are and being like, oh yeah, like, are there any things that you would, what are your thoughts? Or are there any areas you think I would want to address or improve on as far as the interview process, right? And so a lot of times they'll tell you like, yeah, we're a little hesitant on this thing, right? I use it all the time. I remember that story earlier I told you where I got to the third interview and I was like, so how did you feel this third interview went? I really liked the company. And the lady, she was like, yeah, well, we've hired most of our people by referrals and we've had since COVID, we hadn't hired anyone. And I feel like I like you a lot and I want you on the team, but I also want to respect some of the other people that have applied previous years and give them the opportunity. And so that was her reasoning, and she was very clear about that when I asked, right? Which was the main hesitancy that I seen. So there's nothing wrong with asking, right? So, and sometimes you're going to just get direct emails. I'm reading a question asking, like, what do you do when you just get an automatic rejection email? I would still, I would follow up with the company, especially if the automatic rejection's instant, right? And just be like, hey, I applied. I want to know, like, when the next time frame is. Are there any areas you would think I can improve on? Usually, you want to target specific people. To ask those questions to. They're not always going to get back to you because, like I said, they're not often always trying to put themselves at risk, right, for why they didn't hire you. But you can also make a claim that maybe you just didn't put all your experience on or what have you and reapply. So I had a guy who reapplied to a number of positions after he revamped his resume and got several interviews from those companies that rejected him. So I won't say it's out of the question. It can happen, right? So, what do I think about LinkedIn Easy Apply if it is effective or not, right? I believe it can be extremely effective if we're talking about if you're an all-star, right? If you're like the LeBron James or Messi of soccer, right? And they see your resume and they're like, oh, this person has 15 years. They have multiple awards and they have all these accolades, and your resume stands out, right? If you're someone that doesn't have a amazing resume that's out of the, blows people out of the water, really your job search is going to consist of consistent communication, outreach, follow up, and applying, right? So I'll say easy apply is okay, but it's only a small fraction of the overall process, right? You're going to want to make sure that you are having a multi-touch point process in your interviewing to be effective. So, Colin, do you have any tips for an executive looking for a job as compared to an entry level position, right? So a lot of it, Colin, and I've worked with a number of executives, is really looking at more. One, you can still apply like traditional people do, and some of these roles that you see on LinkedIn. There's going to be director, senior director roles, right? And some CEO roles. A lot of the times, you're going to be networking as well, right? They're going to be associations, groups, and some of the people I've worked with really have targeted on building out. And going through their relationships to get positions. So I would focus probably a combination of heavy networking and looking at different organizations and still applying for those roles that exist, right? So they're going to be slightly different, right? Because you're probably wanting to you're going to go through a different process than an entry level role. So it's a little bit deeper to kind of explain here, but there are several ways to kind of approach your job search as an executive, which you're right is going to be slightly different than a lot of people. Carolyn, you can request this through email, which I'll send a follow-up email to this. And I have another question as well. There are many jobs getting duplicated ads. I did my research, shaping job posting an ad on 10 sites. And do you refer the employer to to open the employer links and apply? So, when I was in recruitment, something that happens as well is that several companies will bid for one position, right? So they're actually all working for one client, and they're all trying to fill a role one like first. So you'll see a duplicate amount of roles, right? For that. Also, a practice that I found with several of the recruitment companies is that they actually were posting jobs that didn't exist at all, with the hopes of getting clients to are getting candidates to send to potential clients. And really what they say is like, hey, I have this guy that's really good at, process development, and do you need someone like that? But that guy thinks that you already have a job available, right? So there are some shady tactics that some organizations use to get ahead to do those things. So also looking directly at company websites can be beneficial because that's very rare that they would mislead you, right? On their company page, right? So I would definitely do a bit of research about certain roles and what kind of companies are advertising them, right? Because you have internal and external recruiters, which internal recruiters are going to be ones that work for Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whatever kind of company you work for. And then external ones, which are some of the organizations that I worked for, are going to be ones that work for a multitude of clients and they have a higher sales pressure on them because they need to close these jobs, right? Which makes them a little bit more gritty in their approach. So you have to be mindful about the intentionality and really not blindly trust these individuals to help you get a job. I know several recruiters and their intention wasn't for the people's best interest. It was really just to make money, which it's a job, so I understand that. So you want to be mindful and protect your own interests is going to be important for you. So do we have any other last minute questions? We have a few minutes left. I want to make sure that I address any questions or concerns. And please let me know if you want me to clarify anything as well. I'd be more than happy to clarify. And lastly, I did a data engineer role. I'm looking for a manager, senior manager, as my experience is 15 years. How would us How would I be successful uh, in getting one of those roles with my current experience? So yeah, so I think a lot of those kind of things, right? Especially when we're talking about showcasing and going for higher roles, really we want to do our best to understand what does the ideal person look like for this role, right? And I'll tell you one thing, most people who are like hiring for a position, they want the next person they talk to ideally be the greatest person ever, right? They don't want to continue to job search and go through this process. They want the job search to be over as well, right? And so for you, you want to be that person that can, be that amazing next hire. So when we talk about moving into positions above where we are currently, we really want to understand the archetype of that role and what kind of person they're looking for. And as we talk about senior manager positions, we're going to start to lean on our success as a leader and just our success as project completion, right? Overall. So we're going to really talk about our abilities as an individual contributor, but really lean on what we've been able to accomplish on a grander scheme and start to look more objectively at some of the projects and activities that you've done, right? And lastly, when is the one-on-one resume opportunity you were talking about? So you can, and I'll send a follow-up email. Also, I have a link to a LinkedIn slash resume review bundle. It just includes a 15-minute video where I break down your LinkedIn and resume. It goes over just a basic lamp list and kind of how to utilize your lamp list. And then we just have a basic AI writing prompt. A lot of people that use AI to write their resume and cover letters and things like that, they don't understand prompt writing that well. And so you can only use these tools as effective as you know how to use them, right? So we want to be a little bit better at putting in the right details to get the right output. So it also includes the AI prompt. So that link, I'll send a follow-up email as well for you all to review if you would like that kind of support. So Strength Finders, for example, right, is really just a book that you take a personality test. It shoots out, I think, your top five up to 27 if you get the in-depth one of how you work, right? So it'll tell you what kind of socializing style you have, what kind of environments you work well in, and how best you should focus your energy and time, right? For me, my specific personality type is one that gives presentations that's very social, uh, very much likes to start activities and likes to kind of bounce around, right? So it's a little bit more in depth than that, right? But it really effectively helps you to get an idea of where do I work best and what environments help me be successful, right? I can probably catch a fish in a lake that only has like 10 fish, right? But if I'm fishing in a lake that has 10,000 fish, it'd be easier for me to catch a fish, right? When we talk about job searching, you want to set yourself up to get as many opportunities as possible, but that also means to find your strengths and be able to create a value proposition that allows people to easily find you and understand what you bring to the table so that you are easily fishing for roles and not uh, in a strenuous process, if that makes sense. So, Ethan, we have what qualities are more important to interviewers during an interview? The techniques required for the position are your personality, passion, and motivation, right? So that's a great question. I think that one of the things, I've been known to be really good at interviews, is really to one, show that you are adept at your position, right? But there are going to be several things that interviewers are going to be looking for, right? So what are the concerns of interviewers, right? One, that you're terrible at your job and that you'd be a bad hire. Two, that you could be really good at your job, but you're a terrible culture fit, right? That you won't get along with anyone or you'll make the process harder for everyone around you, right? Or three, you're a great culture fit and you're really good at what you do, but you don't really plan on staying here at all, right? And that I will have to do this job search all over again and then interview a bunch of new candidates, right? So those are some of the basic questions that, we're trying to solve. And as an interviewee, we want to address those issues before they come up, right? So we want to show that one, we're agreeable, two, we're really good at what we do, and three, that we have the idea of being loyal to this company, right? At least you ideally want to be loyal to that company, right? And show that you have the longevity to stay there, right? So I'd say it's a combination of one, having a decent personality, but also being really good at what you do. That also is contingent on your industry and environments. There's some industries where your personality, like people have really dry personalities and aren't fun to be around, but they're really focused and really good at what they do, right? So it really is also contingent on your industry and the culture of the company that you work for. So that's also going to be what factors into how people view you, which you can do research to kind of see how they go about their process there. So I hear that the job market for data engineers in the UK is difficult. Uh, One job can have more than 150 CVs as per LinkedIn and data. Is it accurate? I mean, it's possible, right? I've seen people 200 applications, 300 for one role. I will tell you, most of those people aren't qualified. I can tell you 99% of my roles, I think no more than 5% of those people were qualified for the position that I applied to. So don't be deterred by the numbers. Excuse me. Um, I've seen people they have zero science experience, like absolutely zero, and they're like, "Oh, I want to be a senior research person," right? So for them, they're just like, well, why not? They did an easy apply and they were like, why not apply? So don't be deterred by the numbers. There's going to be a lot of people applying to all types of roles. You just want to make sure that you stand out by continuously communicating, making sure your resume is sharp, making sure your LinkedIn sharp, and speaking to their specific skills that they're looking for, right? And competitive markets, I mean, you just got to diversify your approach. Uh, and building your own branding is going to be helpful, right? So if the more you focus on building your LinkedIn out, doing more articles, things like that, some of these things can be tedious. You want to find the best way for you to showcase your skills, but we want to make sure that you are effectively standing out from the crowd. Like someone's much more likely to hire a famous doctor than they are a non-famous doctor, for better or worse, but it's just easier for them because that person has a lot of appeal already, right? So the time you could take over the next few years to develop yourself and create your personal brand in your industry will make your job search easier in a competitive market, if that makes sense. We're gonna start to wrap up here. Um, I have one more question. I would like to LinkedIn shows an accurate data and our jobs applied at the yeah, so LinkedIn does show a relatively accurate amount of jobs that people applied to, right? The amount of individual. All I'm saying is that those individuals aren't always good quality candidates, right? So number one problem in recruitment is that we have millions of candidates. Not all of them are good, right? Which is what our job is to refine and search through. But I wouldn't be deterred by that number. So anyway, this is Mastering the Job Hunt. We have a workshop next Saturday, 9 a.m. PST time, which is going to be how to write a winning resume, right? We'll cover a little bit about applicant tracking systems, the elements to a good resume, some of the misconceptions about formatting, and then how to effectively, quantify your abilities and show your effectiveness, and then how to utilize your resume in the market, right? Is kind of what we're going to talk about. Then I'll send a link and a follow-up email, and you can request a recording by email as well. So I really appreciate you all for showing up today, showing up for yourself. I will tell you that things can seem bleak, but there's always going to be a lot of opportunities out there. And I would always say just invest in yourself, right? It's going to be the biggest payoff. So don't be deterred. Just keep going at it, and things will slowly unfold for you. So thank you so much for joining me this Sunday, depending on where you are in the world. So it's going to be, Roberta, it's going to be 9 a.m. PST. So it's West Coast. I'm California based. So maybe a little early for East Coasters, but it'd be a good thing. I hope you won't miss. So, all right, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much and take care.